The night shift at St. Catherine's Medical Center had its own rhythm. It was not peaceful, but it was predictable. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above polished floors. Monitors pulsed in steady intervals. The air carried the sterile scent of disinfectant layered over stale coffee. At the central nurses' station, charts were stacked in uneven piles. Two veteran nurses compared schedules for the weekend. A respiratory therapist leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone. The atmosphere was casual, edged with fatigue. The new nurse stood slightly apart from them. Her name badge read Elena Ward, RN. It was her third night on this floor. She spoke only when necessary. She did not join the complaints about staffing ratios or cafeteria food. She did not correct anyone. She simply listened. When she moved with purpose. No wasted steps, no visible hesitation. She double-checked medication dosages before administration, even when the orders were clear. She recalibrated a cardiac monitor that had been beeping intermittently all evening. She adjusted an IV line that had been placed correctly but not optimally. None of it dramatic, none of it loud. At 1:12 a.m., she paused in the hallway outside room 418. The security camera at the end of the corridor rotated slowly, then stopped for 2 seconds longer than the programmed cycle before correcting itself. No one else noticed. Elena's eyes lifted briefly to the lens. She continued walking. Inside 418, an elderly patient slept under thin blankets. Elena checked his vitals and made a quiet note in the electronic chart. Her posture was relaxed, but her awareness extended beyond the room, down the hall, toward the stairwell exit, toward the elevator bank. She had already memorized the layout of the unit. 2 exits, 1 badge-controlled medication room, a blind spot near the supply closet where the camera coverage overlapped imperfectly. She had confirmed it earlier by accidentally dropping a pen and observing the angles. Not out of paranoia, out of habit. Back at the nurses' station, a younger nurse rolled her eyes. "She's intense," the younger nurse whispered to the respiratory therapist, nodding toward Elena. "It's just med-surg, not a war zone." The therapist chuckled. "Give her a week. She'll relax." Elena returned without acknowledging them. She picked up a chart and began reviewing labs for the next hour. Her face revealed nothing. No irritation, no embarrassment. At 1:47 a.m., a medication alert appeared in the system for room 426, a potassium supplement ordered at a slightly elevated dosage. The prescribing physician had miscalculated based on outdated lab values. Most nurses would have administered it and flagged it later. Elena closed the chart and walked directly to the lab terminal. She pulled the most recent results, recalculated silently, and paged the physician. Her voice on the phone was calm. "I need clarification on the potassium order for 426. The latest labs show improvement. The dosage may need adjustment." There was a pause on the other end. "You're new," the physician said flatly. "The order is correct." "With respect," she replied evenly, "the trend indicates risk of overshoot. I recommend revision." Silence again. Then a sigh. "Fine. Reduce by half. I'll update the chart." She ended the call without expression. No announcement. No correction offered at the nurse's station. She simply adjusted the medication and documented it. An hour later, the physician quietly updated the record without further comment. At 2:03 a.m., the elevator doors opened at the far end of the hallway. Elena's head lifted before the sound fully registered. 2 maintenance workers stepped out, pushing a cart. Their uniforms were standard hospital gray, but one of them scanned the hallway too carefully. Not like a janitor. Like someone measuring space. Elena continued charting. She noted their shoes. Not hospital-issued. Tactical tread, recently cleaned. The cart wheels squeaked inconsistently. Poorly maintained for official equipment. They passed the nurse's station. "Evening," one of them said. The veteran nurse waved without looking up. Don't block the crash cart. Elena's eyes followed them until they turned the corner toward the supply corridor. She stood slowly. I'll check linens, she said, voice neutral. No one objected. She walked down the hallway at a normal pace. Not hurried, not slow. Her breathing steady. As she turned the corner, she saw the maintenance cart positioned near the blind spot she had identified earlier. One worker stood partially shielded from camera view. The other examined the badge reader on the medication room door. Elena stepped fully into the corridor. "Can I help you?" she asked gently. Both men looked at her. The one near the badge reader smiled too quickly. "Routine inspection?" "At 2 in the morning?" she asked. "Less traffic," he replied. Her gaze moved to the badge reader, then to his hands. No tools visible, just observation. "The inspection schedule is logged through facilities," she said. "I didn't see an alert." A beat of silence. The second man shifted his weight. Elena's voice remained even. "If you need access to the medication room, I'll need to verify clearance." She did not raise her tone. She did not threaten to call security. She simply stood between them and the door. The man near the badge reader held her gaze longer than necessary, assessing. Then he nodded once. "No problem," he said. "We'll come back tomorrow." They repositioned the cart and walked toward the elevator without further comment. Elena remained in the corridor until the elevator doors closed. Only then did she remove her hospital phone and send a brief internal message to the night supervisor. "Unscheduled maintenance activity near med storage. Recommend review of security logs. No alarm. No panic." When she returned to the nurse's station, the younger nurse glanced up. "Everything okay?" "Yes," Elena said. She resumed her seat and continued charting. The hallway returned to its usual rhythm, machines breathing, lights humming, staff murmuring softly. But Elena did not sit back in her chair. She sat forward, listening, watching, and waiting. At 2:17 a.m., the building changed before anyone understood why. The lights did not go out. They dimmed, a controlled drop in power lasting less than a second. The monitors held their rhythm, but several systems at the nurse's station reset simultaneously. The medication dispensing cabinet locked, unlocked, then re-verified staff badges. The veteran charge nurse frowned at the screen. "Again, maintenance said they fixed that." Elena did not answer. She was already standing. From somewhere beyond the ambulance bay, doors came the low vibration of engines, multiple vehicles, idling together. Not the uneven pattern of emergency arrivals. This was synchronized, timed spacing, no sirens. She walked toward the windows at the end of the hall. Black SUVs rolled into position beneath the emergency canopy, each stopping at exact intervals. Headlights remained on. No one rushed. Doors opened almost simultaneously. Men and women stepped out wearing dark coats over body armor. Their movement was efficient but controlled. No visible urgency, yet no hesitation either. Each person already knew where to stand before reaching the entrance. The automatic doors opened once. Then they did not close. The first man through them showed a badge to the overnight security guard. The guard's posture changed immediately. Shoulders tightened. Radio lifted. Within 30 seconds, the atmosphere of the hospital shifted from routine fatigue to restrained alertness. Staff began appearing in the hallway, curious, irritated, confused. A resident physician muttered about incoming trauma cases. Someone assumed a prisoner transport. Another whispered about a high-profile patient. The man who had entered first walked directly toward the central desk. He did not look around in fascination the way outsiders often did. He studied exits, corners, ceiling fixtures. He stopped in front of the charge nurse. "We need temporary control of entry points," he said calmly. "No one leaves the floor until instructed." The charge nurse blinked. "Excuse me?" He held up identification again, closer this time. "We're conducting a federal operation. We will not interfere with patient care." The words sounded practiced, precise, intentionally limited. "Is someone dangerous?" a resident asked. The man ignored the question. Elena watched from several steps behind the group. Her expression did not change, but her eyes tracked the positions of each arriving agent, two near elevators, one at the stairwell, another at the far corridor intersection. They had secured access points first, correct priority. But then she noticed what they missed. No one accounted for internal patient transport routes, the gurney corridor connecting radiology to the surgical wing, a bypass that allowed movement between floors without passing public checkpoints. Most hospital staff barely remembered it existed. Her gaze moved briefly toward the double doors leading there. She said nothing. Administration arrived moments later, pulled from sleep and confusion. Questions overlapped. The agents provided no detail beyond a single instruction: maintain normal operations, which was impossible. Phones began ringing as family members called overnight patients. The front desk reported visitors being stopped outside. Rumors multiplied faster than information. A nurse refused to administer medication without clarification about lockdown protocol. A resident tried to escort a patient downstairs and was redirected. The hospital was not built for secrecy. Its structure depended on constant movement and open coordination. Now, every routine task required negotiation with armed strangers. Through it all, Elena continued her rounds. She adjusted an oxygen cannula in 412, replaced a depleted IV bag in 419, recorded vitals with steady handwriting. But she altered her routes, subtle deviations that brought her past each guarded point once per cycle. She observed hand placement on holsters, radio channels used, eye movement patterns. They were experienced but unfamiliar with hospital flow. At 2:46 a.m., the first complication occurred. A post-operative patient in 427 began showing signs of respiratory distress. The attending physician ordered an immediate portable X-ray and possible transfer to step-down monitoring. The transport team rolled a gurney into the hall, directly toward the stairwell now blocked by an agent. "Stop," the agent said, raising a hand. "It's a patient transfer," the transporter replied. "No movement between floors. He needs imaging now." The agent hesitated. He pressed his earpiece, listening. The delay stretched longer than medical protocol allowed. The patient coughed violently. The physician's tone sharpened. "Move!" The agent did not move. The hallway tension tightened. Clinical urgency meeting procedural rigidity. Elena stepped forward just enough to be heard but not noticed as intervening. "Use radiology corridor," she told the transporter quietly, pointing behind her. "Same floor access." The physician looked at her. "That's longer." "Clear path," she answered. He assessed the patient once more, then nodded. "Go." The gurney turned and moved quickly down the alternate hall, bypassing the standoff entirely. The agent lowered his hand slowly, realizing the conflict had resolved without his involvement. He glanced at Elena. She had already returned to charting. Minutes later, a different agent approached the charge nurse again. "We need a list of all admitted patients in the last 12 hours. "That's confidential medical information," she replied carefully. "It's necessary." She hesitated, looking toward administration for support that was not coming. Elena spoke from behind her computer without raising her head. "Admissions records require a written request logged through hospital compliance." Both turned toward her. The agent studied her face. "And how long does that take?" 5 minutes if properly filed," she answered. She slid a form across the counter, already opened to the correct page. The agent paused, then took it. No confrontation, no refusal, just process. He completed it. As he walked away, the charge nurse whispered, "Thank you." Elena gave a small nod and continued typing. By 3:10 a.m., the entire floor existed in suspended motion. No one knew what they were protecting against, only that something specific was being searched for. Agents rotated positions, but never relaxed. Elena noticed one more detail. They were not scanning rooms randomly. They were waiting for movement. Her eyes drifted once more toward the transport corridor doors. Whatever the operation was, it depended on someone inside the hospital changing location, and the agents were preparing to intercept it. She closed a patient chart and stood again, not alarmed, not surprised, only certain the night was still in its early stages. By 3:18 a.m., fatigue had turned into pressure. The agents had taken positions, but the hospital had not slowed. Machines still required monitoring. Medication times still arrived without regard for federal operations. Patients woke disoriented by unfamiliar voices in the hallway and the sight of unfamiliar silhouettes standing near exits. Tension did not explode. It accumulated. Elena felt it in the pacing of footsteps and the tone of whispered conversations. The staff were beginning to work around the agents instead of with them, creating small unpredictabilities. Doors left ajar, unscheduled movements, verbal instructions passed instead of charted. That was when mistakes would begin. She moved through room 433, checking a post-surgical dressing, when the overhead system clicked. Respiratory assistance to 421. The call carried urgency but not panic. Yet. She stepped into the hallway and immediately saw the problem. A patient from 421 was being prepared for rapid oxygen support. The respiratory therapist pushed equipment toward the room, while two agents shifted position to maintain corridor control. They repositioned incorrectly. In trying to maintain line of sight to the elevators, they created a narrowing in the hallway, a funnel that forced staff to cross each other's paths at the doorway. Equipment, cables, and bodies converged in a space that required separation. The therapist hesitated. "I need space." An agent extended an arm, redirecting foot traffic. Another staff member tried to pass behind him with a medication tray. The tray clipped a portable monitor cable. The monitor tilted. The patient inside 421 began coughing violently. More people moved closer. Exactly what should not happen. Elena stepped beside the supply cart and spoke calmly, not loudly. "Rotate your position 2 steps left. Leave the doorway clear." The nearest agent glanced at her but did not move. "Ma'am, please step back." She did not step back. 2 steps left," she repeated evenly. "You're blocking medical access. We have containment protocol." "You have a choke point," she said quietly. The words were not argumentative. They were observational. For a fraction of a second, the agent hesitated, long enough to look at the floor layout, at the converging lines of people and equipment. He shifted 2 steps left. The corridor opened immediately. The therapist rolled equipment through. The medication tray passed cleanly behind him. Airflow tubing connected without obstruction. Inside the room, breathing stabilized within seconds. No one thanked her. No one announced the correction. The moment dissolved back into motion, but the agent looked at her again, not dismissively this time. 20 minutes later, another complication surfaced. Radiology called the floor requesting transport of a patient requiring urgent imaging. The assigned orderly attempted to bring the gurney through the secured intersection, where 2 agents now stood shoulder-width apart, controlling cross-traffic. The orderly stopped. "I have clearance from nursing." "Hold position," one agent said, listening to his earpiece. The patient on the gurney stirred anxiously, disoriented by the delay. Elena approached from the side corridor. "Radiology corridor is already monitored," she told the orderly. "Use it." The agent turned to her. "We are controlling all movement through this hall." "You are controlling the visible hall?" she answered. "There is a parallel route you're not covering." He frowned. "Where?" She pointed, not dramatically, just a brief gesture toward the service doors. "That passage bypasses your observation point. If your objective is containment, you need presence there or allow monitored passage here." The agent studied her face, then keyed his radio quietly. He spoke in low tones, describing the alternate route. A pause followed. Then, understood. He stepped aside. Proceed here. The gurney passed through under observation rather than disappearing into an uncontrolled corridor. Again, Elena walked away before anyone addressed her. By 3:57 a.m., the agent's posture had subtly changed. They were no longer merely guarding positions. They were adapting positions, adjusting angles, widening spacing near medical doors, leaving clearance near emergency equipment. Not all at once. Gradually. One of them had begun asking staff short, precise questions. How often is this hall used? Where do night transports originate? Which door alarms after hours? Information they should have gathered earlier. Elena heard the questions, but did not participate unless necessary. She corrected a mislabeled specimen container. She replaced a depleted suction canister before anyone requested it. She anticipated a physician's need for ultrasound gel before he reached the cart. Competence without display. At 4:12 a.m., the near conflict occurred. A surgical team arrived from another floor, unaware of the operation. They pushed a sedated patient toward the secured elevators, speaking quickly among themselves about operating room readiness. An agent raised his hand. "Stop! No elevator access!" "We have an OR booked," the surgeon replied sharply. "Step aside." "Elevators are restricted." "We are not delaying anesthesia." Voices hardened. Another agent approached from behind, misreading the urgency as defiance rather than procedure. His hand hovered near his radio and near his holster. The patient's monitor alarmed softly. Elena stepped between them but slightly offset, not blocking anyone, simply entering the line of sight. "Operating room 3 is prepped?" she asked the surgical nurse. "Yes." "Then use internal lift," she said. The surgeon frowned. "That lift is for equipment." "It reaches the same floor and is currently clear," she replied. He considered the patient's vitals, then nodded once. "Move." The team redirected immediately. The agents relaxed almost imperceptibly. One of them exhaled. "Thank you." Elena met his eyes briefly. "Patients first." She walked away before conversation could continue. By 4:30 a.m., the operation had stabilized. No alarms triggered. No forced entries. The hospital functioned again, constrained but flowing. Near the nurses' station, the field commander stood reviewing a floor map on a tablet. His gaze lifted as Elena passed. He watched her continue down the corridor, noting how staff unconsciously adjusted around her guidance, how problems resolved without escalation when she was near. He did not call out to her. Not yet. But for the first time since arrival, the agents were no longer only waiting for someone to move. They were beginning to realize someone already was, carefully shaping the environment around them, and they had not been the ones directing it. By 4:42 a.m., the hospital had reached a fragile equilibrium. The staff worked. The agents watched. Both groups had stopped resisting each other, but neither trusted the silence. Elena felt the change before she saw its cause. Room 438. The patient admitted shortly after midnight, listed as dehydration and exhaustion, no family contacts, minimal personal effects, vitals stable since arrival, too stable. She entered for routine observation. The man lay on his side, eyes closed, breathing measured but not asleep. His heart rate did not shift when she approached the bedside, awake but conserving movement. She checked his IV line. The tape had been lifted and reapplied, carefully enough to pass casual inspection, but reversed from standard placement. Someone accustomed to removing restraints or monitoring circulation without leaving marks. Her voice remained neutral. "Any discomfort?" "No," he said softly. His tone carried awareness of the hallway beyond the door, counting footsteps, mapping distance. Elena adjusted the blanket slightly higher across his shoulder. In the reflection of the darkened monitor screen, she watched his eyes open a fraction, tracking the doorway behind her rather than her hands. Not a patient waiting for discharge, a man waiting for timing. She finished the vitals check and exited without pause. At the nurse's station, she updated the chart. Routine notes, nothing alarming, then walked directly toward the field commander reviewing the digital floor plan. She stopped at a respectful distance. "You are guarding exits," she said quietly. He looked up. "Yes." "You should guard arrivals." He studied her face, measuring tone more than words. "Explain." She kept her voice level. "Your team is positioned to intercept movement outward, but your subject has not attempted to leave." "Meaning?" "He is waiting for a controlled pickup point," she replied. "Inside." The commander's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. "Which patient?" She held his gaze. "I will tell you privately." He hesitated only a moment before nodding. They stepped into an empty consultation room and closed the door. The hallway noise softened. For the first time, she spoke without hospital phrasing. "Your perimeter is correct for extraction prevention," she said, calm and precise. "Not for contact interception. He expects confirmation before moving. When he receives it, he will relocate to a predictable transfer corridor, not an exit." The commander's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're making assumptions based on behavior." "I'm describing tradecraft," she answered. Silence settled between them. He reached slowly into his coat and removed his badge again, placing it on the table. Not to show authority, but to clarify jurisdiction. "Who are you?" Elena did not reach for the badge. Instead, she spoke a short sequence of words, structured, clipped, operational identifiers rather than names. Not loud, not dramatic. The commander's expression did not change immediately. Then his shoulders lowered by a fraction. "You're listed as unavailable," he said. "I was," she replied. He studied her another moment, recalculating the entire operation in silence. When he spoke again, his tone had altered, no longer directive, but confirmatory. "You're senior to this operation." "Yes." He exhaled once, quietly. "Why are you here?" "Because the man in 438 isn't the objective," she said. A longer silence followed. "Then what is?" "The contact coming for him." The commander absorbed that without visible reaction. "Our intel indicated retrieval." "Your intel is incomplete," she replied. "He was meant to draw observation outward. The real exchange happens when you relax internal control to process discharge or transfer." She pointed to the map. "Here. The radiology corridor junction. It allows approach disguised as medical transport." The commander considered the layout, then keyed his radio softly, issuing adjustments that sounded routine to anyone listening. Positions shifted subtly. One agent replaced another. The pattern changed without attracting attention. He ended the transmission and looked back at her. "Why not take command openly?" "Because the hospital remains operational," she said. "Panic creates casualties faster than fugitives." He nodded once. A brief pause. "You understand," he said carefully, "that if we tighten containment now, we may lose the contact entirely." "Yes." "And if we wait?" "We confirm identity," she finished. The decision sat between them. Capture now, risk harming patients and losing the network. Wait, risk losing the individual but protecting lives and gaining intelligence. The commander watched her. "You're choosing to let him move." "I'm choosing not to turn a hospital into a barricade," she answered. He accepted it. They stepped back into the hallway. Nothing appeared different, yet every agent now watched the radiology junction without appearing to. At 5:03 a.m., a transport orderly approached, pushing an empty wheelchair. Not one of the regular staff. The gait was controlled, posture upright despite the disguise. He moved toward room 438 with mild, rehearsed confusion. An agent began to intercept. The commander lifted a single finger. "Wait." The orderly knocked once and entered. Inside, the patient sat up immediately. Elena observed from the far end of the corridor, expression unchanged. 30 seconds passed, then both men exited. one supporting the other as if assisting a weak patient. They turned toward the radiology corridor. Agents allowed distance to form. At the junction, the commander spoke quietly into his radio. 2 agents closed the path behind them. 2 more appeared ahead. No weapons drawn, no shouting. The contact froze, calculation collapsing into realization. The patient lowered his eyes. Elena watched only long enough to confirm control. Then she turned away before anyone looked toward her. By 5:40 a.m., the hospital had returned to motion. Not normal motion, careful motion. The radiology corridor was clear again. Equipment moved where it was expected to move. The overhead paging system resumed its indifferent routine. A patient requested water. Another asked what time it was. No alarms, no raised voices. The 2 men taken into custody had never passed through public areas. Most of the staff believed a transfer disagreement had simply been resolved by administrators. The agents spoke quietly and kept their distance. The black vehicles outside remained, but fewer people noticed them now. Inside the medication room, Elena finished counting controlled substances with the charge nurse. "Strange night," the nurse muttered, signing the log. Elena nodded once. "Yes." No further explanation came. At the nurse's station, charting resumed at its usual pace. Coffee cups replaced tension. The respiratory therapist complained about paperwork. Someone laughed softly at something forgotten hours earlier. The commander approached the desk but did not interrupt the staff. He waited until Elena finished documenting vitals. "Walk with me," he said quietly. She followed him down the hallway toward the stairwell exit. No agents stood immediately nearby. The door remained closed, the corridor empty except for distant monitor tones. He handed her a small folded document. Not a commendation, not formal recognition, just confirmation. "The contact confirmed network channels we've tracked for months," he said, "without hospital exposure." She read it briefly, then folded it again. "Good. You chose patience over certainty," he added. "I chose containment without harm," she replied. He studied her expression. "Command will ask why you didn't assume visible authority." "They won't," she said calmly. "Your report will state operational adjustment based on environmental assessment." A faint pause. "You trust me to write it that way," he said. "Yes." He held her gaze for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. Not to a superior, not to a subordinate, but to someone whose responsibility matched his own. "Transportation is ready when you are." She shook her head slightly. "Shift ends in 20 minutes. He almost smiled, but didn't. At 6:02 a.m., dawn began filtering through the high windows of the East Wing. The night staff prepared handoff reports. Day nurses arrived carrying fresh fatigue and new conversations. Elena delivered her report precisely. Patient conditions, medication adjustments, respiratory events, no mention of federal presence, no mention of custody. The day nurse skimmed the chart. "Quiet night?" Elena considered for half a second. "Yes." She removed her badge and placed it on the counter. "I won't be on tonight's schedule," she said. "Oh, already transferring?" the nurse asked casually. "Something like that." She collected nothing else. Her locker stood open but empty, as if it had never been assigned. In the parking lot, the last black vehicle idled near the exit. The commander stood beside it. No handshake, no farewell speech. She entered the rear seat. The door closed softly. The motorcade left before full daylight reached the building. 3 weeks later, hospital administration received a formal envelope marked Federal. Inside was a brief letter thanking the facility for cooperation during an unspecified interagency operation. Attached was a commendation for assistance provided by night staff. The line identifying the individual was redacted. At the nurse's station, the charge nurse read it twice. "Must have been serious," she said. The respiratory therapist shrugged. "At least nothing bad happened." They filed the letter away. By then, Elena Ward existed only in the scheduling archive. 3 completed shifts, no forwarding contact, no employment transfer record. The hallway cameras continued their slow rotation, monitors continued their steady rhythm, and the hospital returned to the kind of quiet where important things happened without anyone realizing